Parents sided with my cheating ex, denied me shelter after divorce. Now, have you ever felt like your family didn't have your back when you needed them the most? What happens when the person you love betrays you and your family turns away? The woman in this story faced the toughest decisions of her life. After being betrayed and not receiving any support from her family, she decided to cut all ties. But when she found new happiness, her family wanted to come back. What will she do? You won't be able to guess her final decision. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Parents sided with my cheating ex, denied me shelter after divorce. Now 5 years later, they want back in after hearing about my engagement. After my divorce 5 years ago, my parents lost relations with me. James cheated on me with his receptionist. I discovered it when browsing his phone. My suspicions were long-standing, so I checked his texts one day. I realized our marriage was finished then. I struggled because James and I were together over a decade before we married. We were childhood sweethearts because his parents were friends of mine. We met and started dating that way. After high school, we had an on and off relationship, but at 22, our parents pressured us to marry. So we did. We often fought after marriage. He cheated even though I never considered it. I left our house that day after learning about his affair because I was hurt. My initial thought was to visit my parents. I assumed James has already spoken to them. He probably knew I'd go there and wanted to stop me. Amazingly, my parents refused to let me in after he asked. Standing outside their door, I begged to remain for a few days until I found a place. They informed me they wouldn't consider this because James was still my husband and we could figure things out. Even after I told them James cheated on me, they didn't seem to mind. They said they knew about his adultery because James confessed when he called. My folks say one person cannot break a marriage. Thus, they indirectly blamed me for everything. I wasn't surprised since that's always been their attitude toward me. Why I expected their assistance back then is beyond me. I repeatedly told my parents about my marriage issues before James's infidelity. I told them I didn't want to stay with him. However, they constantly told me I was too ambitious and didn't give my marriage enough time, hence it failed. When I tried to stay with them that day, they accused me of being more focused on work than my marriage. I was fed up when they blamed me. I left immediately. My friends are nice, so I visited one to tell her about my divorce even though I wasn't ready. She graciously hosted me for 2 weeks. I met with a lawyer, filed for divorce, and looked for an apartment over those weeks. My pals were the only ones who supported me emotionally back then. My parents never spoke to me except to tell me how bad I was for leaving my unfaithful spouse. James kept contacting me, insisting we could still work and that marriage counseling would help us. He continued apologizing, as if it would help. Naturally, my parents supported him and urged me to forgive him. Once I cut them out of my life, they ceased trying to contact me. After the divorce, I had no touch with them. I haven't spoken to my parents since, and I don't regret it. When we meet at family functions sponsored by other relatives, we ignore each other. I'm okay with this because they don't regret what they did to me. My partner Ethan and I are engaged after 5 years. My 3 years with him have been some of my best. His restaurant was where we met. I was out with pals when he approached. After a while, I discovered he owned the restaurant. After a few dates, we grew serious. Within weeks, I discovered he owned that restaurant and had a comparable business history. Ethan grew up interested in all things cooking because his father owns one of the state's largest bakery chains. This led to his restaurant launching. Though I was impressed, I didn't care because I'm a working woman and plan to work after marriage. Unlike my parents, I've never wanted his money. After learning about Ethan, they immediately tried to reconnect with me. It happened last week, only days after I announced my engagement on social media. I imagine a relative told my parents I was engaged. They must have researched Ethan and his family. 3 days after my announcement, they emailed me. They congratulated me on my engagement and apologized for their past behavior in their email. They apologized for not contacting me in recent years and wanted to attend my wedding. They avoided talking about Ethan or his family, which was sensible. But I'm not stupid enough to fall for it. It was strange that they contacted me after my engagement, even though they felt awful and wanted to contact me earlier. I declined to respond. When they wanted back in my life, they reached out again, and they did. They revealed themselves in the second email. They told me they had read about Ethan and his family and liked my choice. It made me think they assumed I was dating Ethan for a reason, which was untrue. It worsened. They said they reached out because of Ethan and his family in that email. They stated they were proud of my prestigious lineage. The email was arrogant, and I was irritated that they were primarily interested in the fact that I had secured a place in a wealthy family through marriage. That email's purpose is unknown. They probably didn't understand it made matters worse. I blocked them after reading. A few days of tranquility ended last night. I've lived in Ethan's apartment for a year. Few family members know where I live, and only a few close acquaintances and relatives have visited. They could not have told my parents. I guess my folks found out. When asked, they didn't say how. Our residence was visited last night. Ethan and I were astonished to find them outside. Ethan understands my parents' past, divorce, and reactions, and he doesn't like it. The door was opened by him. He called me over to talk to my parents when he spotted them. Thankfully, Ethan stayed with me. Knowing I was struggling, he held my hand throughout my conversation with my parents. My parents apologized, stating they didn't want to seem more interested in Ethan and his family than my forgiveness. They said they wanted to contact me several times over the last few years, but didn't because they knew I'd be furious with them for their earlier behavior. Those were invalid reasons, I told them. They treated my divorce insensitively. I wouldn't have forgiven them if they'd reached out before, and I wouldn't forgive them now. After 5 years of divorce, I no longer need them. I was harsh and told them to leave. I don't know how they obtained my address, but I warned them I'd contact the police if they returned. My dad yelled at me as I turned to close the door. He called me egoistic and cocky, stating I couldn't treat them like way since I was marrying into a rich family. I was angered by that unwarranted and incorrect statement. This wasn't my behavior because I was marrying into his family. No sane person would have said it. I returned it to Dad. I said it wasn't about me marrying into a rich family, but their behavior. Despite 5 years to change, they were still unpleasant, and I avoided them. I knew shutting them out of my life was right, and I never intended to forgive them. After I said that, they addressed Ethan instead of me. They warned him about my attitude problem because it ended my marriage. They made it clear that James had cheated on me with the workplace receptionist he'd known for months. While I was still engaged, they boasted that James and this woman were happily married with a child. They said I could never have a happy family since I was always showing off my superiority. I guess I had done this before by focusing too much on work instead of my marriage, and now I was acting superior because Ethan was rich. My superiority complex lost me my first marriage and would cost me my second, they said. Thanks to my fiancé, Ethan ignored their warnings about me. Ethan refused dating advice from folks like my parents. Because I was marrying him and he was rich, he stated I could brag about it. He said that whether I had an attitude problem or not was his concern, and they didn't need to worry about him because we weren't bothered about them. The last thing Ethan said left me stunned. He informed my parents that he was delighted my ex had found love with the lady he had an affair with, and that it was indicative that they still supported James instead of me after 5 years to reflect on their behavior. He said that it didn't matter because they weren't close to our net worth. He closed the door as they panicked outside. My parents left eventually. I didn't believe it would go farther, but my paternal grandparents called this morning. They lectured me about Ethan and my mistreatment of my parents. Since my grandparents and I have been friendly, it was surprising. Despite being in touch with my parents for 5 years, they have always been neutral about this subject. They instantly thought I should apologize to my parents, especially after Ethan told them about our net wealth. They claimed that my parents had made mistakes, but they had always tried to be good to me. Maybe, but my connection with my parents has always been tense and complicated, even from childhood. I cannot dispute that they have always supported me and tried to make my life comfortable. My grandparents emphasized that I should be grateful to my parents. They cautioned me not to gloat about my wealth, especially since it's not mine. My in-laws are rich. They say I can't brag because I'm still in my parents' income category. I told my grandparents that Ethan had responded that way to my parents, not me. My grandparents ignored my refusal to talk to them. They stated it didn't matter who spoke as long as I permitted it, which humiliated my parents. They said I should have stood up for my parents, even if I didn't want to forgive them. I told my grandparents that my parents had spoken nasty things about me, but they replied it didn't matter. Their sole concern was my behavior. Therefore, they claimed they will talk to my parents separately about their errors. I got frustrated since the conversation went in circles and they didn't comprehend me. They then revealed that a man who disrespected my family would never appreciate me. Then they hung up. Although I love Ethan and don't think he did anything wrong, my grandparents' reaction has made me wonder about my handling of the incident. Am I responsible for letting my affluent fiancé trash my estranged parents' substandard finances? Update 1. Hello, everybody. I and Ethan appreciate your support and remarks. We feel no obligation to my family, not even an apology, after considering everything. They kept saying I was too smug and arrogant because I married into an affluent family. Ethan and I will act as they accuse us. After talking to friends and reading the comments, I don't think I or my fiancé did anything wrong. No need for guilt. Ethan explicitly stated that he will not apologize to anyone who has disrespected me, not once but repeatedly. Even their last visit to our residence was insulting. They persisted after I told them I didn't want to discuss or forgive them and tried to make me appear awful for rejecting their nonsense. Ethan said he knew my parents were bad based on what I told him before. After meeting them, he said they were terrible and suggested I never forgive or speak to them. I totally agree with him. Ethan made a good point when I told him my grandparents' words. He told me my grandparents had avoided the turmoil because it was convenient. When my parents were hurt, they jumped in. They were okay as long as I hurt. After their darling son was offended, they pursued me. Ethan advised me to examine this before acting on their advice. I considered it. He made a valid point. When I tried to talk to my grandparents about my relationship with my parents for 5 years, they said I needed to figure it out alone and didn't want to become involved. I stopped venting to them since I knew they wouldn't listen. Looking back, their neutrality seemed to be a strategy to keep diplomatic and on good terms with us. Since they clearly prioritize my father over me, I believe they don't plan on being diplomatic anymore. I was dumb to expect other behavior. Anyway, I'm delighted Ethan's here. He appears angrier than me about this, which I find endearing. It shows his love for me. Update 2. Hello, everybody. My grandparents called me a week ago to say I was incorrect in how I handled my parents and wanted to apologize. Since I didn't react last week, they contacted me again. Since I blocked my parents and grandparents, they created a new email account and wrote me an email. My handling of the problem disappointed them. They were surprised that I had blocked them because they had always tried their best to be on my side during the past 5 years. However, they agreed that staying diplomatic was a mistake and that they should have informed me that my parents were right about everything and that I had an attitude problem to fix. Their argument was repeating my parents' unsubstantiated assertions. They basically repeated my parents' criticism since they couldn't find a rationale. Naturally, they made it personal for no reason. Even though they had always said my parents and I had valid but different perspectives and couldn't tell who was right or wrong. That email was annoying. After seeing it, Ethan said he was glad we hadn't apologized or contacted them because they didn't deserve it. He claimed they were greedy and that my family had an attitude problem, not me. I didn't reply to that email and won't. I don't want to dispute or prove my point. They've already made me the villain, so they'll never trust me. They'll keep making excuses to blame me. It probably worries them that I'm marrying Ethan, getting affluent, and cutting them out of my life so they can't benefit from my marriage. Ironic because Ethan and I believe that if they wanted forgiveness, they should have been nicer and boosted our egos. Bitterness and resentment have made things worse for them without them realizing it. Maybe they do. They're indifferent. No matter what, they're out of my life. Third update. My last update was 2 months ago. Because I wasn't concerned anymore, I forgot about my parents' and grandparents' problems. I became busy organizing my wedding and doing other things after they didn't contact me again. My parents returned to my place 3 days ago. Ethan was away this time. When I saw them outside, I didn't open the door. I told them through the door that I didn't want to argue again. I told them to leave or I would call the police, which would be very bad for them. Despite my concerns, my parents stayed. My dad said he didn't expect me to forgive or accept them back. He wanted to apologize for how he and my mom acted last time. He added that after much consideration, they recognized they had made things worse by refusing to accept that I wasn't ready to forgive them. Now, they wanted me to know they were sorry for their repeated failures and would apologize until I forgave them. My mother said they would wait the rest of their life for my forgiveness. That was a big statement. I felt forced to open the door. I told them I didn't know what to say or how to feel. All I knew was that I wasn't ready to deal with them. I calmly told them they didn't need to apologize anymore. I needed some space from them. In a few years, I might contact them. For now, I desire solitude. I'm not sure if I'll ever contact them, but I said that to lighten the situation. It improved their mood. Even if it took 2 years, my mother stated she would like to hear from me. She hoped I'd forgive them one day. She cried and stated that she and my father had always been too arrogant and proud to accept they weren't the finest parents, especially after my divorce. They said they were misled into thinking I had an attitude problem. Since then, they'd been confused about me, sometimes thinking I was right and sometimes James was right. This is why they felt their attitude toward me was constantly inconsistent and confusing. Personally, I don't accept that excuse. God, I'm their daughter. My personality should be well known. They didn't spend much time with me as kids or teens. Not knowing me well isn't unexpected. That's their fault, not mine. I didn't want to start a major ordeal, so I just informed them what occurred and couldn't be altered. I added that if they wanted me to forgive them, they should stay away from me and let me heal. They departed quietly without saying anything. When Ethan returned home, I informed him how I handled the matter and what my parents and I discussed during their visit. He said the scenario may have been worse, but was thankful it wasn't. I'm trying not to think about my parents because I don't know how to feel. My wedding planning is my priority, and I hope it goes well. Fourth update, hey, I got married last week and had a blast. Naturally, my immediate family did not attend since they were not invited. I invited my maternal grandparents, but they reside out of state and my grandpa is sick. As a result, few family members attended the wedding, but I didn't mind. Ethan was with me, and his family welcomed me as one of their own. That's really appreciated. My parents called me from a burner phone 2 days after the wedding. They said my cousins told them about my wedding. Even though I didn't want them at the wedding, they claimed they were thrilled for me and wished me joy in my new life. I thanked them and said nothing else. Many of you may say I shouldn't have hosted them during their last visit. Some may say I should have called the police, but that would have simply increased anger and hatred, causing more drama. I like this technique better. I don't think I'll ever be close to my parents, but we don't fight. Neutrality seems ideal for everyone. In life, we often turn to our families, believing that love, support, and understanding will always be found there, but sometimes family is not the only place that brings love and respect. The story of the woman in this video serves as a testament to the fact that sometimes we must learn to stand up for ourselves and live for our own happiness, even if our family is unwilling or unable to understand us. Not every family is a source of comfort, and sometimes true freedom and happiness come from letting go of unhealthy relationships and seeking out those who genuinely love us. The woman in this story has gone through a long journey to realize that she doesn't need to live up to her family's expectations. She must live true to herself. Despite the heartache, she chose to move forward with her fiancé, who was her source of love and respect. The apology from her family couldn't heal the wounds in her heart, and that was her choice. A strong decision to protect herself and her happiness. In the end, this story is not just a lesson about family, but also a lesson in self-respect and the power of living authentically, despite the difficulties and challenges imposed by those around us. Sometimes we need to let go of the past and those who don't truly understand or love us in order to open a brighter new chapter in our lives. If this story has made you reflect and change the way you view family and relationships in your own life, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep up with inspiring stories, valuable lessons, and videos that can help shape your life. Let's continue exploring the stories that remind us that happiness is not determined by others, but created by us. Thank you for watching.